Babies, I consider it one of the hallmarks of professionalism to bring you people who share our tendency towards obsession, because we all know that obsession is the wellspring of genius and madness. But the best obsessions bring forth the most exquisite results. I think you're with me on this. And today we are talking to not one, but two beautifully, and I mean it, beautifully obsessed people. And we're back in my home territory. So you all may have heard, and you may be participating in the modern temperance movement. Less is more. And on the alcohol front, I'm definitely not here to cast any shade on anyone who has chosen to imbibe less or not at all, but you can still appreciate the craft of making beautifully transformed, delicious things out of the fruits of our incredible labors on this earth. And so today, it is my extreme pleasure to introduce you to my very dear friends, Robin Touche and Kevin Pike of Branchwater Farms. Robin and Kevin have an incredible backstory. They have this beautiful website. I can't recommend enough that you go and read it all and look at it all. It's so pretty and well done and well thought. But more than that, they're making amazing spirits, which you can enjoy by the teaspoon or tablespoon if you're working on little less, or in your cocktails and mixology, which I highly recommend. Anyway, these are actually spirits that I recommend trying first, just as they are, because they are truly magnificent and they've worked really hard to get where they are. Their story is incredible. We will get into some of it. They both have a wine background. They've graduated to something much stronger, and they've landed in this beautiful farm in the Hudson Valley. We're gonna get into all the things with Kevin and Robin, and they do their production of the various things that they grow. Their ambitions are to be no-till, and we talk about the struggles with that along the way. It's a fascinating journey, and they are so wonderful, and I highly recommend you check them out and follow them. So without further ado, let's get to the introductions.
Today's episode is brought to you by Rimol Greenhouses.
Whether it's tomatoes to market, flowers in the spring, or your family's harvest, growing in a greenhouse protected from the weather provides the right environment that you need for a harvest that you can count on. Rimol Greenhouses are designed for durability and offer the quality that you need to grow productively year-round. Visit rimolgreenhouses.com to get a quote today.
If I may editorialize for a second, I own a Rimol tunnel. I love it. We built it ourselves, and I really appreciated the quality of the tunnel as well as the customer service we received in the process. So make sure to check them out. Today's episode is also brought to you by BCS America. BCS two-wheel tractors are designed and built in Italy, where small-scale farming has been a way of life for generations. Discover the beauty of BCS on your farm with PTO-driven implements for soil working, shredding cover crops, spreading compost, mowing under fences, clearing snow, and much more, all powered by a single gear-driven machine that's tailored to the size and scale of your operation. We have been using a BCS tractor on our farm since 2014, and it has saved the day and leveled the workload more times than I can count. And I find new ways to employ it every single season. To learn more, view sale pricing, or locate your nearest dealer, visit bcsamerica.com. That's bcsamerica.com. To learn more, view sale pricing, or locate your nearest dealer, visit bcsamerica.com. That's bcsamerica.com. All right, enjoy the show.
It's been a minute. I'm really excited to have you guys on the show.
We're excited to be here.
Okay, I know you guys and I love you dearly, but the rest of the world doesn't know you. So, okay, first, introduce yourselves, both of you, but not at the same time. And then tell us, what is Branchwater? What do you grow in there? How many acres? Where in the world are you? That kind of thing.
I'll introduce myself first and let Kevin do more of the talking. So my name is Robin Touche, and I live here in Milan, New York with my husband, Kevin Pike, and we started Branchwater Farms in 2014, so almost exactly 10 years ago. We purchased an old dairy farm, essentially, that had never really been used as such, and started kind of planting seeds for our dream of a farm. And I'll let Kevin take over.
My name is Kevin Pike, and we both come from the wine business, so that's kind of our backgrounds, and that's how we know you. And I have a small wine importing company called Schatzi Wines, where we focus on Northern European wines. And then my dream was to always kind of have a farm. My mother grew up on a farm on the South Dakota border of Iowa, and Robin's father grew up on kind of like a subsistence farm in Louisiana. And I think when we told him that what we wanted to do, he was like, "Get out of there," because his memory of being on a farm was about this is the worst place ever. I need to go to school. He was the first. Wasn't he the first?
He was the second kid in his town to go to college, because his father understood the benefit of education. So my father, they were sharecroppers. And so his understanding of a farm was not the idyllic idea that a lot of people have of a farm.
Ours also is an idyllic view of what a farm is. So the farm is nestled in the Hudson Valley. It's an area that is the soils. We're in between the kind of the Taconic Hills and the Catskill Mountains. So the Catskills are on the west side of the Hudson River. We're on the east side of the river. So the Taconics kind of butt up against us, and those become the Berkshires when you go further north up into Massachusetts. The soil here is all kind of glacial moraine, so it's 90% sand with a lot. It's really bony. It's got a lot of cobbles of quartzite and shale, sandstone. It's just big boulders. It's hard on the equipment. Every year after we're in the fields, we have to spend time repairing equipment and stuff like that, because it's really, really hard.
Yeah.
We kind of, the farm is in between. It's in a valley between two hills, so we're pretty low. I think the highest point on the farm is about 600 feet above sea level, but that's an area that we don't use. That's just a wooded area. Where the barn and all the buildings are, and the distillery is about 480 feet above sea level, and the little Wappinger Creek bisects the farm. So it kind of comes from the northeast corner of the farm down to the southwest corner of the farm, and that's a tributary that goes into the Wappinger Creek that goes into the Hudson River further down south. But the town of Milan is quite unique because 5 major water groups have their headwaters here, and so we're very rich in water. So it's kind of the opposite problem that other parts of the country have. We have more water than we need. But we recently finished a report, a natural resource inventory for the town that we had a grant from the DEC for.
Oh, cool.
And we had the guy that came in and talked to us about the water he was like, "You guys are like the Saudi Arabia of oil for water, because it's just there's a lot of groundwater here." So that has its own challenges. We have a lot of wetlands. We have 100 acres total at the farm.
We have a lot of beavers in those wetlands.
Yes.
They have their own agenda.
Exactly. So we only have 25 acres that are currently in fields that we use for the crops. Everything else is wooded or wetland or just left to be wild.
So, and just to kind of explain what Branchwater is, it's we decided early on to call it Branchwater Farms because we kind of always envisioned it being having multiple uses. Our backgrounds being in wine, early discussions, we kind of thought, well, could we make wine here? We agreed that we couldn't make the quality of wine that we would want to make, and we wouldn't be able to work organically, regeneratively. It's just there's a lot of humidity.
Unless we did hybrids, though. I mean, I've reconsidered this actually, because I think at the beginning there was a lot of hubris in at least my way of thinking and saying, well, if I wanted to use Vitis vinifera, it wouldn't work here because we're just too humid. And the amount of copper we would have to spray to keep oidium down would be a lot. So, but I think if we were to take kind of a chapter out of what Vermont is teaching us, doing hybrids that are disease resistant would be a way to go. But we chose a different path, which was growing grain for distillation.
Yeah, there's a tradition of that in the Hudson Valley as well. We had also talked about planting orchards, which I'm really glad we didn't, because the financial and time constraints there, you plant it for generations down the road, and we've discovered just how many wonderful families have already been doing that here. In the process of production. So we grow grain for distillation on site. So we did a renovation of the old dairy barn, pretty much completed during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And so we grow grains here for spirits, and then we bring in fruit from New York State growers for fruit brandies. And then we also raise a couple of wacky characters in the form of ducks and chickens and a couple goats.
Yeah. So just for the listener, because that you guys did a beautiful job describing what you're doing, but just to paint a little picture, I've been there, and it's like freaking Sleepy Hollow. I mean, it's so beautiful, and what you guys have with the diversity on your property is, it's all the things that you imagine that super bucolic landscape being like, a couple hundred years ago. So I feel like you're really not just, kind of, I guess, pioneers in terms of like a value-added agricultural product to kind of bring agriculture back to what has kind of been fallowed agricultural land out there, and also kind of keeping the integrity of the historic landscape. And I just encourage everybody to visit your website and your Instagram to look at the pictures, because they're so, it's kind of off the chain how pretty it is.
It's interesting about this area because originally when this was settled with Europeans, it was mostly clear cut, and there wasn't a lot of forest here at all. And wheat was the main product that was grown, wheat and rye. And then as the Erie Canal opened up and you could get grain from the Midwest back here to the East Coast, wheat left. It was the ground is just so rocky. It wasn't worth plowing. And then what came in were merino sheep. And then the sheep, and that's why we have all the stone walls kind of around the farm, because that was used. They were pulling the stones out of the fields when they were plowing them for grain production. Yeah. And they built the stone walls for paddocks for the sheep. And then the sheep basically left when refrigeration came in and people moved over to apples. So that's kind of the progression of how things went. And then as people got out of that, then everything became reforested. If we look back at old aerial photos of our farm from the 30s and the 1940s, the only trees you see are sentinel trees that mark, different borders of different properties. Otherwise, everything was open and farmed.
Well, that's the area. I remember walking a part that it's kind of my favorite part. I call it the secret field, walking it. And it's the area that's like, it's basically cedars. There's a lot that doesn't belong there, right? That's a long-term project at some point that we really need to tackle. But yeah, it's kind of fascinating, the layers of like what's here and why.
It is. And you guys have done such a great job of actually reaching back into that history and knowing the story of your land, and really trying to be the chapter that sort of honors everything good and tries to do everything a little bit better. So let's talk about spirits, because you guys are wine people. That's how we met. Robin worked for my New York importer, and I met Kevin. And I'll also just make a little shameless plug for Schatzi's book, which is very cool wines. If you are into Northern European wines, which everybody should be. And so you're working in wine, and you have this dream. You want to have a farm. You don't want to do Vitis vinifera, which, by the way, very solid choice there, because it's true that place is a disease basket for for poor old vinifera. So, but you're wine people, you're in the business of selling wine, and you decide to do spirits. So talk about the calculus there. And I mean, I was going to save this for the end, but I think you guys took a long time sort of developing your plan, and everyone should, but no one does. So, walk us through that.
Well, the first idea was cheese. We both love cheese. And I went as far as to take some cheese tours and classes in Europe. A good friend of mine, Johannes Hirsch from Weingut Hirsch in the Comtel Valley in Austria, has a really good friend. Well, he's certified by Respect as a biodynamic producer, and part of his closed loop is that he has some fields that are cut for hay that he then trades to this cheesemaker who has water buffalo and goats that he makes the cheese out of, and then the manure comes back to him for the compost. So that's his kind of his loop there. But he had this really good friend that was a cheesemaker, and I was able to go do that with him for a couple of days, and then we started to really think about cheese and like the shelf life of cheese and the shrinkage of cheese, and not knowing how to sell cheese, or like we realized we didn't know what we were getting into with that, even though it's a passion of like enjoying eating cheese. It's a totally different thing.
It's kind of like going to like a winery and doing like I don't know,
a blending.
Blending, yeah, exactly. And then you're a winemaker. Like not gonna happen. Yeah. So we figured like wine, spirits, they're kind of in the same wheelhouse, but like we've discovered how much they are not in the process. But luckily we had kind of an understanding of how distribution works. Kevin had like a network of distributor pals around the country, so we knew we would at least know how to get it flowing, how to talk about it, how to sell it. Totally different than wine, and it's been a huge learning curve. And for me personally, the whole process of it, it's like chemistry. I just did not do well in that class, so
it's never too late.
It's never too late. I know. I'm taking a quick tour every time I'm in the distillery with Kevin. But yeah. So then Hans Reisbauer.
Well, so then it morphed into cider. And then that was kind of the main thing. And then because cider is quite big in New York, and it's
big everywhere. It's good.
Yeah, it's growing. Yeah. And so that was kind of the wine connection. Instead of using grapes, we would use apples. And that was our thought process. The first tractor that we bought was an orchard tractor. That was a huge mistake because we never ended up getting orchard. So the tractor was very powerful, but way too small. Way too small for the equipment we need for grain. So so that was one of our first mistakes.
But we sold it.
One of many mistakes. But then I have a very good friend named Hans Reisbauer, whom I met when I used to work for Terry Thies at the Skurnik distribution company, and he's a master distiller in Austria, and I always was a fan of his schnapps or eau de vie or brandies that we would call them here. And he makes carrot and wild cherry, apricot, pear, apple.
And he's done everything.
They're so good.
He's done tomatoes and asparagus. He hasn't released them because they're not good. He's thrown those out, but he's tried everything along the way. And
asparagus.
Yeah, exactly. So I just said to him, I was like, if I work on this distillery, would you help me with it? And he said, absolutely, I'll help you. And he waited for us. It took us 7 years to kind of get the financing together. We finally got money through an SBA loan. But that's a long process to go through that SBA process. And he waited for us. And actually the 2 pots that we have in our distillery are his original pots that he sold back to Christian Karl, the manufacturer in Germany, that retrofitted them from heating with electricity, which is what he uses, to heating with steam, which is what we use. So the original plan here was just one 450-liter pot still. And he told me he was getting rid of these 2 because he was upgrading all of his. And I said, well, can I buy one of yours? Because the plan was to always add a second one. He said, well, if they're heated with heat, not with steam, I don't know if it'll work. So we talked to Christian Karl, and they said, it absolutely will work. And then they said, well, what do you want to do? 1 450-liter still or 2 330-liter stills? And I said 2 of them, because that gives us so much more flexibility about what we can do, how we do it, the size of what we're doing. So we can do smaller runs, especially of fruits that are pretty rare, like black currant or something like that. So that's how it ended up. So he taught me how to distill. He's
over
Zoom
because it was
and
during
WhatsApp.
COVID. Yeah.
that thing.
Yeah.
That thing.
But
COVID distilling.
But the advantage was that they were his pots originally, so he knew how they worked. So even though they're heated with steam, so they are a little bit different, but he could still understand it. And I had to show him, I had to have a camera pointed at the temperatures. I had to have, so he could see everything. And that's
hilarious.
And I would take samples, mail him the samples, and then he would comment and send them back. And
Amazing. Do you think it would have happened if COVID hadn't happened? Like, did that open up a chunk of time or like capacity that you didn't have?
We were already in the renovation of the barn. We got slowed down because of COVID.
Right. Because I remember you guys in 2018 were already like tricking out the barn. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the slowdown during COVID was because New York State put a moratorium on all construction.
And we didn't know where we kind of stood.
But farms were exempt. But we didn't know if the farm was exempt, if we were renovating a barn or a farm that was like actually producing stuff. We weren't producing anything yet. So we had to get a special letter from the New York State attorney allowing us to continue.
That's so
good times, COVID. I keep forgetting about all this stuff.
Yeah. So, and grain alcohol is on a different timeline than like, brandy or something like that. So talk about the process. I mean, these are steam heat. I mean, that sounds cool. Like, talk about that. Well,
maybe we'll talk about the grain first.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, the business plan was cider and then also spirits, and then we basically said just spirits, and it was never our intention to do the farming. So we were always there are some companies in this part of the Hudson Valley that do contract custom farming mostly for people that have farmland as a second home, and they want to have the agricultural exemption. So they have someone cut hay for them, and that gives them the $10,000 revenue stream that gives them the ag exemption. So that was our first move. And the first thing we did actually was we cut for hay and let it just lay on the ground, just so it could go back into the ground, because it was for 20, 30 years, it was cut for hay and everything was taken off.
Yeah.
Yeah. The soil was pretty depleted.
You did a lot of adjustments too.
Right. We also, we put a lot of lime down from a quarry in Connecticut. And then we did a lot of co-planting. So I did like cowpeas and buckwheat, because the buckwheat steals the nitrogen from the cowpea, so the cowpea produces more. So it's a way to get more nitrogen into the soil. Red clover, rye, winter peas, daikon radish for drainage. All the normal salad of things that you would put down to kind of jumpstart the soil back again. And then we traded. And then we did cut hay, and we traded it all for manure. So we got manure in here and then spread that everywhere. So
we got the shit end of that.
That's right.
So that's what we were trying to do. And then we grew one crop of wheat and rye with a contract farmer. And then I told them we want to do it organically, but it wasn't. So for them, that just meant, well, we won't spray anything, we won't do anything, we'll just leave it alone. But they didn't really understand that organic also needs input. It needs, you need nitrogen somewhere. So you've got to get it from either certified organic chicken manure or some other way. So cover cropping, et cetera. So they weren't really up for that. And so then we realized that we had to learn how to do it. So that's when we had to invest in machines and equipment to do it on our own. And because we had the 7 years of struggling to find financing to get the money to start our renovation, it allowed us 7 years of basically trial and error without any consequence. Like, the distillery was not built yet, so we couldn't produce anything. But we had this year to try this and try it a second time and
lose a few times.
Yeah, we lost crops 5 years in a row, basically, because I was trying to do no-till completely. And I've discovered that on an annual crop, it's really complicated to do.
Right. We haven't figured it out.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, it is one of the hardest things. I mean, I'm pretty convinced you'll get there, but I totally get it. And we talked about that. I remember, like, it's not going to be you go from 0 to no-till with annual grains. It's the holy grail. It really is.
So our current process right now is we plow in October. We then plant the winter seeds of rye and wheat, In March, we need to have a frozen day so that we can go on the fields again with the tractor. If it's not frozen, then we rip it up with the tires at the tractor. And we spread certified organic chicken manure and boron, a mixture of both of them, for nitrogen fixing. And then I oversow with red clover at the same time. And then the freezing and thawing of the soil sows the clover into the ground. And when spring comes, when April comes, and the rye and the wheat shoot right up, the clover kind of slowly grows, but it grows more quickly than the weeds, and it makes a carpet and shades the weeds and helps suppress them. And that system works for us pretty well right now. And then when we harvest in July, then the clover still grows. And what we did this year for the first time, and I think it's going to be our plan going forward, is that we have one field that's 15 acres, one field that's 6, and every year we're going to put 6 acres fallow over the winter and put the animals into that field. So after the harvest, we bale the straw from the harvest, and then we bring the animals in, and we all that straw ends up back in the field, because when we muck out their coops as we move them around, the straw goes back as organic material back into the field, and we get the advantage of their manure, which is really helpful. And then we'll plant in the springtime. We'll do that salad mixture again. Sunflowers, oats. Oats are good for the mycorrhizal fungi, and so that's our plan at the moment. And so every year we'll put 6 acres fallow and move that around. That's the current plan.
And have things been getting? I mean, would you say that it's been a linear progression in terms of like your learning curve and how you've sorted out various rotations and things like that? Or have there been, like peaks and deep valleys?
I would say it was mostly deep valleys until we came to this new system, and then it's been kind of an uphill, and the quality of the grain,
of the soil too.
Yeah.
But the one real big challenge with this system is that July is proving to be a very wet season, and that's when we need to be dry. We've progressively, like the last few years, had 2021 we lost everything, right?
Yeah.
2021 or 2022
because of rain.
Yeah, storms, like very excessive. And then this past year as well, like that we had to have like 3 days of dry weather in July, and like literally we hit that 1 3-day window to harvest everything, but it was just it was discouraging, because like these are the little babies you've been tending and putting a lot of expectation and care and into, and then July just needs to behave. And obviously, Mother Nature is pretty pissed, and we understand. But it's becoming a little tenuous to rely on July.
Yeah, those summer storms for you can be, just huge amounts of water in a very short period of time. And if you're seeding out, what do you do? It just
a big thunderstorm will knock all the grain down, and then you can't harvest it. So that happened in 21. Everything was knocked over.
So we've dodged a couple of bullets with weather the last few years, where people have had really, excessive like flooding. And I think where we are is a very special location, and we are protected.
Yeah.
Relatively.
It's changed storage a little bit too, though. Like, normally if it rains, you need to wait 3 or 4 days for it to dry out before you can harvest again. And what we're doing now is we're just taking it all in, and I'm putting it into the bins and just leaving the fans on to dry it out in the bins as much as I can. And the old kind of rule of thumb, if you talk to an old farmer in this area, they would say, well, if you don't put the fan on unless it's completely dry and low humid day. And I was talking to a colleague of ours up at Stonehouse Grains, which is the Rockefeller estate up there.
So the Stone Barns subsidiary.
It's the same owner as Blue Hill Stone Barns, that property, but it's their actual farm up here in Columbia County. And his name is Jay Goldmark, and he's like, just leave the fan on all the time. He says, I don't care if it's raining or if it's humid. No, but it works. It totally works for us, and so that's something I wouldn't have done before. Right. And now we're adapting. We had to invest in fans for the bins, and And even now, like this weekend, yesterday was a beautiful day, sunny and low humidity. I had the fans on because coming out of winter, you run into another problem because the grain's cold. There could be condensation. It can cause moisture and then mold, and it's all the storage. Everything's related, and how you have to keep the grain as best as you can before you actually use it. So
yeah. So talk about the talk about that timeline with the grain. Like from the time that you harvest it to when it's basically become alcohol. Go through the process because people want to know. The people want to know.
So the wheat is our main. Wheat and rye are the two crops that we really grow. I did grow corn one year, but I don't really have the equipment to do it, so I'm not going to do it again. If we decide to produce anything more out of corn, we haven't produced anything yet. The stuff that we harvested from that first year, we still have in storage. I just haven't figured out what to do with it yet. Bourbon is the obvious answer, but anyway, we may buy corn or find another farmer to grow it for us or something like that. So for us, wheat goes into the ground in October. Ideally, September 15th is the best time to go into the ground because that's the last time. That's kind of like there's an old farmer's trick about this. It's about a bug. I can't remember the bug. There's some type of fly that affects the winter crops, and if you plant after September 15th, you're safe. And before, it's not safe. And I can't remember what it is. I'll look it up for you. But anyway, so we plant September 15th. We try to. I'm always planting around the first week of October, and then in March, then we do the organic chicken manure and boron and the cover crop of clover, and then we harvest in the second to third to fourth week of July, depending on rain and when it's ripe. Then it goes into the grain bin, but we're processing all the time. So we basically process grain year round until fruits are ripe. And then when the fruits are ripe, we bring the fruit in. And
fruit season starts about August. Mm-hmm. We do pears in August, and then we move into apples. And depending on what crazy itchings Kevin has, whether it's black currant or cranberry, those get thrown in somewhere in that later schedule as well.
But this year we'll start in July because we committed to 5,000 pounds of cherries, English Morello cherries for the first time.
So fingers crossed weather.
Yeah, those are,
particularly for the growers here because they've had, like last year, the U-pick, there were no cherries, there were no peaches, there were rarely apricots here. So, and that's their livelihood. So for us, it's, if we make a spirit, it doesn't change.
Right.
The bottom line. But
so then what we do is we grind. We have a mill on site. We mill the grain batch by batch. It's kind of the same idea of coffee. If you get ground coffee, you have oxidation. It's doesn't have the floralness and the expressiveness of when you grind it yourself. So we grind it right before it goes into the mash tun. And then in the mash tun, we cook it for about an hour to start to release the starch from the grain. And then we move it into the fermentation tanks and crash the tank with glycol chillers to bring it down to 20 Celsius. So we go from about 85 Celsius to 20 Celsius, and then convert the starch to sugar with enzymes. And then we do the fermentation.
And about how many days is the wheat and rye fermentation?
It's about 5 to 7 days for fermentation.
So it's a ripper.
Yeah. Fruit takes longer.
Fruit we do really cold. So fruit we do at 10 to 11 Celsius. And that apples take about 3 weeks to 4 weeks. Pears about 3 weeks. The black currants took 8 weeks.
Yeah, I was going to say 6
Oh, wow. Well,
really low sugar.
Wait, I was going to say, what is the bricks on currant? Like
it was
13?
The alcohol, it was like 12 and a half to 13.
Yeah. So that would take a minute.
Yeah. And maybe it doesn't want to ferment.
Yeah. I could see that.
The only cranberry bog in New York, up in Brazier Falls, which is like basically you drive up to Montreal, don't cross the border, and go west another hour. So we bought 5,000 pounds of cranberries last year, and the pH, the bricks on that was 2.5.
I was going to say not much. And then what the pH is like, what?
We added water.
Yeah.
We added water to bring the pH up because the yeast can't live in that environment.
Yeah.
And then we did chapitalize
sugar.
That. So that, Otherwise, you can't get anything out of it. So
Yeah.
but as far as I know, we're the only ones doing distilled cranberries, and maybe there's a reason for that.
It sounds really cool, though. Like, where are you at in that process right now?
It's done.
Yeah, weird. It's very weird.
It's aging in stainless steel right now.
Okay.
So the black currant took a year to age in stainless steel before we could release it. At the very beginning, it smelled like earth and eucalyptus. It was really unpleasant.
I mean, not really unpleasant. It wasn't, I think, if you're buying like a fruit brandy, you're expecting a fruit profile where she didn't want to show herself immediately. It was very Sybil-esque. So it was like either like super like green, high tone, minty eucalyptus, or kind of, like dirty, earthy. And then that brambly quality, it took a year for that to express. And even today when I taste it, it's like, it'll play with you a little bit. It's like, what are you showing me? And it's the most interesting, I think, of the spirits right now. But anyway, like we keep getting off track.
So back to grains, right? So after fermentation, we pump into the distillery, and so our fermentation tanks, I typically fill them to about 1,500 liters, and then I can then distill that in both the pots at the same time, filling each pot 3 times, so six fillings. And that's about an 8-hour day of distilling to distill the wort, the beer, from like 6% alcohol up to around 38 to 40% alcohol. And the ratio there is basically 1,500 liters of the wort will make about 270 liters at 38 to 40%.
So about a third.
And then we redistill that, and then that produces about 50 to 55 liters at 84% alcohol. So we're kind of unique in this way. We don't distill the tail ever. So everything here is distilled above 160 proof. So the TTB loves us for the taxes.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Yeah. And your locks, your fancy locks, I'm sure.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So that's the basic process. And then for gin production, if we need to get we have kind of a formula of X number of liters of alcohol at X percent ABV plus X kilos of botanicals is our gin run, basically is how it works. So, we water it down from 85% down to a much lower degree to do a third run with the botanicals for gin. If it's whiskey that we're doing, like a wheat whiskey or a rye whiskey, this is all we do, and then we water it down to 72% alcohol, and then go into the barrel. So again, the government doesn't like us for that because the definitions of things like wheat whiskey, rye whiskey, bourbon whiskey, etc., means that you have to distill below 160 proof, and you have to go into a new oak, American oak cask at 62.5% alcohol. And we distill above 160, and we go in at 70.
So
we water down to 70, go in.
Yeah, how do you get that past their regular?
Everything we label it whiskey made from wheat, and that's allowed.
And the label just says wheat or rye. And then the other use, he was referring to gin before, but like the main use for the wheat that we grow here is the gin.
Today's episode of the No-Till Market Garden podcast is brought to you by Johnny's Selected Seeds. Johnny's Selected Seeds is a proud sponsor of the No-Till Market Garden podcast. Since 1973, Johnny's has supported farmers and gardeners with superior seeds, tools, and information to help ensure their growing success and help feed their communities and families. The research farm is at the heart of Johnny's, where they trial thousands of varieties and tools every year. Their breeding program uniquely focuses on introducing varieties that meet the needs or solve the challenges mixed market, small farmers, and avid gardeners face. Visit johnnyseeds.com for innovative new varieties and time-tested favorites to grow this season. You can also browse their online growers library, link in the description, for a wealth of free educational resources. The employee owners at Johnny's look forward to growing with you. Today's episode is also brought to you by Farmhand. I don't know about you, but I got into farming to grow food, not spend my time creating pack lists, writing newsletters, responding to emails, or maintaining web stores. If I could spend less time on my phone and computer and more time farming, that would be a win. Enter Farmhand. Farmhand is the only all-in-one virtual assistant built by and for CSA farmers. It takes care of the admin, managing orders, customer communications, and automating tedious tasks so you can get back to doing what you love. On average, Farmhand saves CSA farmers 6 hours a week. That's 6 hours you could spend with your family, out in the field, or simply taking a breather. So, what would you do with an extra 6 hours? Now's the time to get your systems ready for next season. Learn how Farmhand can help at farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show.
The regulations say you should do it this other way. What has influenced your choices on that? Like the recipe, but then also like the fraction that you're using and not redistilling. I mean, you're losing a considerable. So talk about why you're doing that and top shelf, baby. So like let's give you all the props for the process.
So most people would collect the heads and the tails and redistill it. We dump it down the drain. So and the reason for that is that the tail gets really soapy and oily, and it's an alcohol that it's just not as fine of an alcohol that you produce. So the way our pots are designed is that it's a pot still. Then you have a helmet. There's one copper plate between the pot and the helmet. And then there's a deflagrator at the top, which is basically a bucket of water that's always circulating cold water at the top. And what that does is it knocks down alcohol. So as the alcohol vaporizes and goes up the side of the helmet, when it gets to that cold area, it can re-liquefy and drop back down. And the more times you do that, you'll get the ones that actually vaporizes and comes out and comes down through the condenser. So we try to collect the highest proof alcohol that we can and discard the rest. And I don't really have a use for the tails. The other reason for the tail is that the second run that we do is we only fill the pots once in the morning. I'm out there making the head cut, which is getting off the methanol and the acetone and the aldehydes, all the stuff that's poisonous. And then it basically runs on its own, and it runs on its own for 8 hours because it's a very low. I had the steam wheel, the little steam. There's a big wheel and a little one. I had the little one only open a quarter turn. That's how low we go. So if you do it really slowly and at a very low temperature, you can get a very high ABV alcohol and extract almost as much alcohol as you can use, but not getting all the soapy oiliness that comes with the tail. And so the other reason why I don't do the tail is because at the end of the day of an 8-hour day of distilling, I don't want to be back out there collecting a tail at that point, To collect the tail, I've got to hook up other things. I crank the heat up really high, burn a lot more energy. And for what purpose?
Yeah, it's the more is not better, philosophy that we're really, really, as things are taking off and we're getting, like our eggs, we have crazy, following for the chicken eggs. And it's like, I could order 200, 500 more birds, have more eggs, sell all the chicken eggs all day, but they would not be healthier chickens. It would just be an assembly line. And we've decided the same for the distillery is we are not going to grow any bigger than we are. And it's human scale. It's 2 of us. And we want to keep it that way. We want to sell everything, of course. We definitely are not hoarding our spirits anyway, but it needs to be quality over quantity, 100%. And I think that there's always an instinct to more
boxes, more dollars. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
That's also what Robin described there is the philosophy behind, leaving 6 hours, I keep saying, but 6 acres fallow now every year. Economically, that's stupid, right? You would plant every year because the crop is the grain that you turn into alcohol that you sell, but it's not better for the land. So we've got to figure out a way, the other thing that we could do is we could start deforesting here to make more fields to use. That's something we don't want to do. So we're trying to find, I keep on Robin to get pigs because I'm trying to find a way to use everything that we create here and close the loops that we open. And, the spent mash is a thing, and pigs will eat it. And we produce a lot of it. All the spent mash that after distilling, we could give that to pigs. They could eat it.
Sure.
They do really like it.
Yeah. And we have a way to collect the water. So when the distillery uses a lot of water, the cooling water on the distillery, we have a way to collect into a hot water tank so that when we're making the second mash, we're starting at 70 Celsius instead of 15 or 20. So it takes a lot less energy to come back up to temperature. Any water that we don't use, we put in IBC totes that goes down to the field for the ducks and the chickens for their water. So the water that we're using, we're trying to reuse as much as possible in the process. And that's part of the philosophy here, is to kind of close the loops that we open.
Yeah, I mean, I think we felt like with the no-till, like I think there was a period where we really felt like we were failing because we invested financially in equipment and in the philosophy we totally wholeheartedly embrace, and we just weren't able to like really see it through every year, and then to have like your crops
fail.
They didn't. It didn't look great. We weren't getting any kind of yield, and several years losing everything. So we're looking at it more holistically in terms of, okay, we are stewards of this very unique, special 100 acres for our lifetime, and we're hopefully like putting into action what we want it to look like after we're gone. But while we're here, we have to do the best that we can. And so some level of forgiveness has been necessary, but we're just always kind of looking for ways to use any kind of waste and close the loopholes.
And because there will be somebody will post something. To be clear, when you say fallow, you're not like leaving open ground that's just like bare soil. You've got something. Yeah.
So after the harvest was done in July, then the clover's growing all through the winter. And then the original idea, Mimi, was to plant a spring crop like barley. And then do our own malting to make a single malt whiskey. I've had to abandon that at this point because barley is really hard to grow in New York, and the only varieties that are being developed at Cornell, Hudson NY and Excelsior Gold, are the two varieties. They produce a high amount of glycosidic nitrile, which is a defense mechanism in the barley.
It's toxic, right? Probably if you,
Exactly. So in the malting process, because of water, heat, carbonate, which is the toxic thing, and then in the distillation process, the exposure to ethanol and copper and even more heat makes it even more pronounced. So, it's a class 2B carcinogen. Yeah. So I had to abandon that idea. So that's why we're doing this salad planting. So right now the field is full of grass and clover and birds. We just moved them this morning from one area to another. Yeah. And then later this month or in April, that's when we'll plant the sunflowers and the oats and the cowpeas and the buckwheat and daikon, and we'll plant that whole salad of stuff. And we'll let that grow we'll terminate that with the roller crimper. What my plan is this year is to try to terminate it in time and replant and terminate and replant and terminate until I get to September, and then no-till drill in the winter into that carpet. That's my trial this year.
That'll be super cool trial. I mean, who knows if it'll work, but
and that would mean no plowing in that field for 2 years.
Great.
So, yeah.
I mean, those are the things you have. I mean, as you say, the forgiveness, it's built into your stewardship. I mean, you have to be able to do what you're doing. And it sounds like you're coming up with the most creative and always asking yourself, is there something else we can try? I mean, I think that's how we get better you don't learn until you start doing, and it's never as easy as it should be. So that sounds super cool. And I mean, okay, so it's very little, like from an original volume, it's a very little amount that you end up getting, but it is this sort of very special, really kind of encapsulated, super distilled, pure voice of your place and what you're doing. And I wonder, have you worked with grain from off campus? Like, do you notice a difference between what comes from your place and what you use from elsewhere?
We did. The year that we lost everything, we bought certified organic wheat from Stonehouse, and I didn't notice any difference in distillation or flavor. But it was a lot cleaner than ours. I have one of those Farm King drum cleaners. You know what I'm talking about? And there's chaff and stuff in there. I'm always like, God, I wish my grain were cleaner, but it just looks like shit all the time. But yeah, it's so maybe the specialness in ours comes from there's
a certain je ne sais quoi.
Yeah. It's the sweatpants. I mean,
that's right.
nobody cares what your grain looks like. It's just like nobody can tell that none of us are wearing pants right now. I mean, and this is going to be a really special podcast, so it's all in the sweatpants. That's awesome. Okay, so and then you work with the fruit from surrounding farmers, and where do you get like the currants? How does that?
That's a really cool story.
So you want to tell that story?
We get it from a fascinating human named Greg Quinn. And he's just down the road from us in Stottsburg, and he's like a local legend, but he should be on everyone's radar nationally because so there was a ban in place against currant production. So what's the family? It's black currant, red currant, gooseberry. And it was basically a century-long ban because it was deemed that they were a co-vector for a blight.
Yeah, a rust that killed white pines.
White pines. And it was during the shipping industry heyday, and they were using white pines for
stupid plantations. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So all the white pines were cut out, and then they brought over saplings from Germany to reforest. And then they figured out that these black currants, whatever, was a vector for the rust that killed those saplings.
So we did what we do best as a country, and we banned it.
Yeah.
So it was like the outlaw fruit. And Greg, during a visit to a local winery, so he's in the Hudson Valley. I don't know where he's originally from, but he kind of had this aha moment where he realized like, oh, this, like, they had like a planting or something of currants at this winery, and he realized that this was something that had potential. And he lobbied Congress to lift this ban, and eventually was successful. So it's state by state. There are still some states.
So interrupt. So in the 1980s, the Congress then deregulated the ban and put it back onto the states. They basically said it's no longer a federal issue. And it remained illegal in New York until 2003, and Greg Quinn is the guy that got the law overturned here. Yeah. It's still illegal in Vermont and New Jersey and several other states around the country.
Massachusetts, maybe even local. But so the reason that Kevin decided to distill it was because it's just this fascinating story, and Greg's an amazing guy, and we kind of just were like, well, we really want to do something that's hyper local, and what would happen if we tried to do black currant? And we also only had gin and pear brandy on the market, and we needed a little more context in showing our spirits to tell people. Like, we didn't have a whiskey.
They were all in barrel.
Everything was in barrel. The apple was in barrel. And so it was like, we could get this. We thought that we would have a quick turnaround and that we'd have another clear spirit to talk about. But as we discussed, it took her a year to show both sides of her personality.
Yeah, exactly.
And it took her, 8 weeks to finish fermentation. So there were some sleepless nights because she was not an inexpensive investment. So when I pour the black currant for people in the tasting room, I say this is the passion fruit project.
Good name. Good name. Okay, so all right, I'm gonna have to look this guy up. Sounds really cool.
Fascinating.
We'll send you his info.
Gooseberries. Are you gonna go there? Are you gonna go? Because I love them. I don't know about distilling them. I have a lot of questions about pectin, but like, God, I love gooseberries. There's just not enough gooseberries out there.
Cuvee.
Yeah.
I haven't found a source. I'm always looking for sources of fruit and things to distill. That's how we found the cranberry guy up on the Canadian border. The pears we buy all locally here. So the pears are mostly coming from Fix Brothers Orchard, which is a farm just south of Hudson in Columbia County.
Generation farm.
Yeah, and Montgomery Place Orchards, which is our local in Red Hook, the next town to the west of us. They're old orchard that's been around. They're fantastic people. It's now actually the orchards are now owned by Bard College.
That's cool.
But the family that runs it have been doing it now in their second generation.
Yeah.
So
Leaf and Doug, I think.
So those are all local for Boss Pear and Bartlett. So Bartlett is Pear Williams that you see in Europe. So we do that, and then we also are doing a single a Bosque pear also. So two different pear brandies. Then the apples all come from the Finger Lakes. The majority of the orchards in our area of the Hudson Valley have been grafted over to pick your own, some more bittersweet varieties. And I wanted cider varieties. So ours is made out of Rhode Island Greening, Ben Davis, and Northern Spy. And then this year we did 100% golden russet that will release as a clear eau de vie.
So good.
Yeah.
Might be my favorite apple. I mean, it's tied with a couple more, but I really do. And as a single, I mean, if you're going to work with one, it's kind of got everything going for it. It's really a good one. Amazing. So, okay, that's really cool. Would you ever do like a nut? Have you thought about that?
Yes. So we've talked about that. The nuts are. I've actually thought about doing hickory. Have you seen like hickory, shagbark hickory?
Dude, okay.
Have you seen that?
Yeah.
No, it's called shagbark hickory syrup, I think. And what you do is you kind of roast the bark that falls off the tree. So you're not hurting the tree in any way. You harvest
it falls right off.
Macerated in the alcohol. So that wouldn't be an actual, and then maybe we could distill it after that maceration. I'm not sure yet how we would do it. I know with nuts, you need to roast the nuts and you do a maceration and then you do a distillation. Yeah, you do a distillation of the macerated alcohol. So we would use wheat as the base probably, and do that maceration and do something from there.
Because those black walnut liqueurs are so cool.
Yeah.
And I mean, the East Coast is kind of lousy with black walnuts, right? I mean, you could probably get your hand on some windfall walnuts. And the shagbark hickory, that's a really, I mean, do you see them very much? Like, I'm just trying to think. I thought they were more.
Our farm is full of shagbark hickories.
Oh, sweet. Okay.
Yeah, we would harvest them directly on the farm. So that's
you'd need a lot.
Yeah. I have all cards on the table. I have 250 liters of wheat that I really don't like. So I didn't put it into the gin. I didn't make a whiskey out of it. So I'm trying to figure out how to use this in some way because it represents a lot of work. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what am I going to do with this? So yeah.
So if you see a black walnut liqueur on the market, it's probably got some.
This is me encouraging you. Yeah. on the nuts and the shagbark hickory. I mean, maybe there's a way you could do like a combined. Anyway, I could go all day. I mean, with spirits, that's the coolest thing. So back to the currants. I can't imagine that was cheap. Because what I mean, are they picking those with tweezers?
$5 a pound. We bought 5,000 pounds, so it's $25,000 in raw material. And that 5,000 pounds filled 2 fermentation tanks, and we got 110 liters of alcohol out of that.
Yeah. Passion fruit.
Yeah. It really is. It must. Is it amazing? I mean, it's amazing, right?
I'm going to send you a little care pack because I realized when I was out there,
I get a 1 ounce. I get a 1 ounce bottle in the mail. No, I'm telling you, don't send anything. I'm going to buy it because everybody should be supporting you guys. And but those are the things. They're so special, and you can do them because you're not trying to take over the world with spirits that are made with nasty, soapy extra stuff. And so don't send me anything. I will buy it. Okay, so just to kind of round out the whole journey, I mean, I think it's always nice when people who are listening, who are maybe not quite to the stage yet that they have been able to get access to land, but they really want to do this kind of thing. I mean, spirits is a fairly, I think, underexplored, value-added agricultural product in America still. I mean, I know that there's the big guys and it's all kind of, well, I will refrain from, I guess, the high-end, bespoke artisanal market. It is a way to do something many times more than what you would otherwise, like, you can't be a small grain farmer. It doesn't make any sense unless you're just homesteading, which in that case, yes, absolutely. But do you have words of wisdom for those people out there who might be in the process of dreaming. I mean, what do you wish people would know that you wish you had known? And also, what are things that you feel like you've really learned along the way, just in terms of like, this is a system that we kind of had to figure out, but it really works. You walked through your fermentation process, but are there things like how much to hold and how, like just spacing it out? I don't know. But like, it's always nice when people can benefit from what you've had to stumble through, because they'll always find more holes, but it's always nice when you can avoid some if you can.
Well, one thing that I would say just hands down that is key is make and find your community, because you're going to need to borrow equipment. You're going to need know-how. Like, nobody walks into this knowing. I mean, Kevin is an avid reader. Obviously, he's got a very remarkable brain. He's curious. He can tinker with things and fix them, but there's always something that you just don't know how to do. And I think the most important thing is find your people and, really invest in the relationship aspect, which we could not do what we're doing without our community of people. But in terms of know-how,
I would say probably the best thing that happened to us was the fact that we didn't have the money.
Yeah.
Because it gave us those 7 years to really think about our business plan and revise it and live on the land and with the land in a way that we wouldn't have appreciated had we jumped in with the business plan as it was originally written.
Yeah.
When we first came here, I kind of looked at these low areas that were swampy, and I was like, we got to tile this and get rid of this water so I can plant something down
out of here.
And now our approach is completely the opposite. We're now trying to coexist and bring more wildlife in and try to create wildlife corridors with other neighbors. And, that's kind of where our head is at this point. No one likes any delays. Delays are always stressful, and they cause stress and anxiety and that type of thing. But I think that was one of the biggest.
Taking time to really listen to what the land is telling you.
It was a huge benefit for us.
Yeah, it really was.
And then on the distilling side, I would say, or any mechanical thing, working with tractors and mash pumps and distilling equipment, you have to be willing to take anything apart at any time and put it back together. You can't be afraid of that. All of our equipment is custom. All right. So there's nobody I can call to come fix it. The manufacturers in Germany, they're not going to come over here and do anything for me. So, I've got to be able to take things apart, figure out what happened, put it back together. Just this weekend I was pumping out the mash tank and the pump broke. And so I had to take apart the pump housing casing and pull the pump out and work on the pump and reassemble it. And meanwhile, because I'm always behind on everything, Mimi, I had 2 pots distilling, and that spent mash had to go into that tank, and the tank was full. So I had to pump it out before the tank were done distilling. So it was like a stressful 2 hours of trying to figure this all out and get it all back together and make it work. And so you have to be willing to be curious and not afraid of the unknown, because a lot of it is unknown.
That's why he's on the distilling side and I'm mucking chicken coops out, because I'm terrified of all the things that can go wrong in a system like that.
But talk about the animal part, because I think that it's been a really important piece for both of you. And also, it is sort of integral to having a kind of a closed loop situation, whether that's a goal or it's something that you're able to do out of the gate. And what does that bring? Are you monetizing that? How is that working into everything else?
Well, surprisingly, we are monetizing it. Kevin is always so proud. He'll come to me with sales reports oh, you sold this much in eggs. And we didn't do, so we've raised chickens and ducks for both eggs and meat. And we have the on-farm exemption here, so we can process the chickens and ducks here up to 1,000 birds, which is just a wonderful thing. And it sounds kind of psycho, but it's one of my favorite things is I mean, I don't look forward to the slaughter, but I really like processing day because, it's like a small community, and you're working with your hands, and it's very rewarding. And obviously, having taken the time and care to like really nourish these animals that then nourish us and our community, it's like a really wonderful, wonderful thing. But the animals, to monetize it, yes, actually, I was surprised. I'd say like having like decided to work with ducks was a good thing. We had water here, so it was the most obvious. It's also, it's a little risky to have them having access to free flowing water, which then they're like the predator risk. So we've experimented with different things with the birds, but finding a home for duck eggs, it's a niche market. Not a lot of people have had duck eggs. Not a lot of people know what to do with the duck eggs. So that's been like very rewarding and fun, doing something that not a lot of people are doing. But then discovering that the reason a lot of people don't raise ducks for meat is because they're a nightmare to
process. Yeah.
There's a thing called pin feathers, and it's real.
It's real. So, I mean, it is. That's a lot. It's a lot to take on.
Yeah. It's chickens are just easy.
Chickens are easy.
They're so easy.
And they're funny. I mean, ducks are so funny. So, but you're still doing ducks.
Yeah. I'm looking to kind of limit how we do the ducks. Like I'm working on a breed that is totally, we do Muscovy, so that's totally on farm, and they're amazing mothers, and they raise their own young. And if I leave them for 3 days, they're trying to sit on eggs, and so we do them on farm.
Breeding.
Yeah. And then I'm working on doing Duclairs this year. So it's white duck that instead of, Pekin, which you buy day old, ducklings, which it's expensive. And you bring them in, and then,
and half of them
I'd rather
die.
have everything here.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And do you guys, I mean, I'm assuming you eat a good chunk of what one of the main reasons for doing this is so that you can fill your own freezer with meat that has had a beautiful life and that you feel has been a part of building the farm that you want and all of that. But do you mostly sell to your most immediate people?
Yeah, we sell from the farm store, and we actually haven't had a lot of our own ducks just because we never do them in great numbers. It's just because it's,
because it's terrible.
Yeah, terrible. And then people come here looking for duck, which is really wonderful. But the chicken we eat about a roast chicken a week, and we've sold through what we have done here, and we didn't do meat birds last year. We took a break. So yeah, we're kind of jonesing for the birds again.
Yeah. But Robin got an incubator last year, so she wants to breed out what's the Bieleffelder?
Yeah, it's like a German dual-purpose chicken that I want to experiment also with, like a longer. Most commercial chickens are
an older lifespan. Yeah, no, that's where I've landed too. It just doesn't feel right.
It doesn't feel right.
So I think that's where Robin's taking the animal program now is to instead of buying day olds that are mailed to us that we raise up and slaughter,
finding things that
work here, do the breeding here. It may mean smaller amount. It will mean more feed, so longer time, more cost, but hopefully a happier bird, a tastier bird, and then fiber animals are the other thing you're talking about. And I'm still lobbying for pigs.
Yeah, no, I think the next species would be pigs. It's such a learning curve every time you get a new species in the mix. We have 4 goats that, they live in the shed behind. Kevin's aunt lives around the corner from us, and they're just comical. Like I just love them. I go and pet them and feed them hay when, it's winter, and then they're just easy. But if we were to do sheep or goat in a meaningful way, it's a lot. And with the parasite situation here, we have deer. We have a lot of deer, and they're a huge risk.
Lots of problems. One thing I just want to, it's funny because I'm like cross-pollinating podcast interviewers right now, but I interviewed this, it's an insect composting operation. They do black soldier flies, and they're coming up with this new sort of modular, basically it's a trial where, they're in like shipping containers, right? And you raise up the soldier flies and they can eat right now they're using mash out of Kentucky in the Midwest, right? So they go through tons of that mash and they produce this larva that the birds are nuts for, dude. And I'm telling you, I've gotten their dried larva, but the live ones. So like if you had one of those modular things, because the thing about pigs, A, delicious, B, hilarious, C, somewhat destructive if you can't hard to manage in a really benign way, and D can be hazardous if you get a mean one. So really cool thing for you guys to look into, because they will eat anything. Like they will eat meat, they will eat bone, they will eat all the thing and the mash. I mean, they love that stuff. So anyway, just a thing to think about.
I love it.
And a little bit easier. You don't have to worry about parasites.
Yeah. Well, the pigs would be used in like a silvoforest program, basically.
Yeah. And they'd probably be delicious because they'd get like acorns and they'd get your mash.
Exactly. So our thinking was to put them in parts of the forest and move them around so that there wouldn't be a sty. It would be a mobile thing. And they would help us clear some of that. I hate the term invasive species, but we have a lot of invasive species here in shrubberies and stuff like that. They would help kind of eat through that. Goats as well.
Goats, yeah. Mm-hmm. You could do it all. I mean, why not? Pile it on, guys. Pile it on.
We need some more projects.
I just want to go back to something that you both sort of touched on, which I think is really, it's really meaningful and worth a little bit of me just drawing a halo around it, because I've had this conversation with a lot of people. The wine industry is just like littered with projects that have, big investors behind them. And you go from like being a floor som to being a wine. I'm not making fun of anybody. This is a thing. Like these people totally earn their chops, winemaking, whatever. But that overnight thing where you go from, like doing this one thing and now you're another profession. It's glossy. It looks sexy, but there's something really, really important about that time that it takes you to learn doing. And it is also a process by which we find out how badly we want to do this thing. And I think that you guys are, for me, kind of like the prettiest poster of what that means, because you don't stop when your pump breaks down. You don't stop when your first four try, you don't quit your day job until you're many, many years in, if ever.
Yeah.
And I say that because yes, it is a question that you're constantly being asked and a devotion that you're constantly remaking, that if you have that other support, which, it's so great and we all envy it sometimes, but there's not that same, how bad do you want it? How bad do you want to do this? How important is it to you? And I love you guys for that, because it has not been easy. It's been a real
kick in the ass.
It's been a real kick in the nuts a few times. So, I think it's amazing that, and I mean, people will look you guys up, and they should, and it's such a beautiful product. I mean, everything that you've done has been like super aligned since day one. And I think it's because exactly how much it means to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for saying that. I think also it takes a lot of optimism. I credit Kevin with being sometimes overly optimistic, but we wouldn't be doing this if it weren't for his vision and and belief. Like he really, I think you have to be hopeful and optimistic to do any kind of agricultural undertaking for sure. But I joke all the time about how I through life have progressively taken pay cuts to happiness, and I literally I've never been happier.
No regrets.
No, absolutely.
It's the best. Yeah. No, go ahead.
I think
Ken.
also the farming community is really a supportive group of people. You know, they're people with a lot more experience than I do, and I go up and I ask a question, and they don't treat me like oh, what is this upstart know, or you know, they're curious, they ask questions, they teach me things. You know, if I'm in a pinch and I have a massive equipment failure or something like that, I have people I can call that will stop everything and will come help. You know, that that type of community I haven't really experienced in other parts of my professional life, in the wine business, for example, on the selling of wine. I'm not talking about making wine. I'm talking about the buying and selling of wine, which is where my experience is. It's not like that. You know, it's a lot of competition and a lot of kind of ego, and it's kind of a different world than what we experience on the farmer side. And what Robin said earlier in the discussion, I think is really crucial. Having that network of farmers as support, finding your people, becomes really critical to your success because you need them. You know, they need you also. That's why they do it, right? Everyone knows that it's a reciprocal relationship. It's not one-sided.
Just like everything in nature. I mean, it really has become the theme of this season for me. I mean, every single person I've interviewed has had some deep sort of reckoning with this codependence that I don't know, we've sort of managed to societally like convince ourselves that it's not critical, but it is super critical, especially now in farming, in any type of land stewardship. We are completely codependent on not just the environment, but also on each other, because we will like you guys said, you know, it's the, you've dodged a few bullets climatically, and we're all dodging different bullets. And when you're dodging one, somebody else is taking one, and we show up for each other in those moments. And it's going to be more and more like that. So yeah, so important what you say. Well, you guys, you've given me more than an hour of your time, and I know that it's a busy life that you lead. So is there anything that you wish I had asked that I didn't? Or is there anything that you want to end with before I let you go?
I would like to end with a note of appreciation, because you have been a spirited cheerleader and guide and just an amazing mentor to us. And I remember so vividly just walking this farm with you, and it informs a lot of things that we do. You might not even realize that, but you're here. You're distilled into this farm, Mimi.
That is the nicest thing. And I was absolutely not fishing for that, but thank you. No, no, seriously. I remember that day, those days. I mean, it was such a special, whatever, it was 2 nights that I spent with you guys, but I felt like I lived there for a time when I look back, and it feels so, special and important to have been there with you guys in those early days when it was all questions and no answers, and just being able to talk through stuff with you guys. It is such a special place. It is such a special place in this country. There's so much history. That land is so, man, it's just drenched in the earliest moments of people being in this place. I mean, way back before colonists came, I mean, it's really something to be there and be with you guys because you love it so much. And there's, I go to a lot of farms, and when you're with somebody or with some buddies who it is so much a part of their whole identity do right by that place while you can, it's a completely different experience. Like you can have a completely different walk just based on that love that you guys have. And, I'm just so happy for the kids that they get to be there with you guys and see that side of life and see your journey. I mean, what an inspiration. Holy crap. But then also like for the rest of us who are now going to be able to like find your brandies, find your spirits and support you going forward. It's a really great moment to check in with you. And I just feel really grateful that I met you when I did.
Thank you.
Making me cry.
Yeah.
Well, you guys have a mandate now. You need to come and visit me.
Okay.
And actually I'm due to come out there and sell some wine. So maybe I'll probably see you there before you come here, but you're always welcome here. And for the people listening on the other side, check out Branchwater Farm. Such a beautiful website, such beautiful products. Cannot wait to see what other things we're going to ferment in the future. But let's all get on this ship and go on the journey with them, because you just won't find two better people. Robin, Kevin, thank you so much for being with me today, and I hope I see you soon.
We do too. Thank you, Mimi.
Thanks.
When I get to share my friends with you friends, it really feels like I'm having a party with you in my living room, which is funny because I'm not actually in my living room, but you get the point. You're welcome to be in my living room with or without me. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that discussion with Kevin and Robin. I hope you will seek out their beautiful products or visit them or follow them, give them a high five on one of the social media outlets that they're much better at frequenting than I am. They are wonderful people. They're making beautiful things. And that is what we love to highlight here on the Market Garden podcast. I know you're not all out there growing the spirits or in the alcohol business, period. But remember, there's always money in the banana stand.
All right. We hope you enjoyed that episode. Always make sure to check the links in the show notes for how to follow our guests and hosts. The No-Till Market Garden podcast is a free show that is supported by folks like you who contribute every month over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. That support helps ensure all the shows we do, from the Seed Farmer podcast to the Winter Growers podcast, the Collaborative Farming podcast, the Composter podcast, Growers Daily, and of course, the No-Till Market Garden podcast, can continue to go and grow. You can also find books and hats as well as an active forum over at no-tillgrowers.com. Huge thank you to editor Michael Sellis and producer Jackson Roulette for all their work on this show and the rest of the team over at no-tillgrowers.com. Otherwise, thank you all for listening, and make sure you are subscribed wherever you're hearing this so you don't miss the next episode of the No-Till Market Garden podcast. See you then.